Good evening. My name is Ryan Strom. I'm the chair of the City of Stewart Local Planning Agency, and welcome to the June 18th Local Planning Agency meeting. And I will turn it over to Mr. Dias.
So pursuant to Executive Order Number 20-69 issued by Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by Florida Statute 120.54. Procedures for public comment. If you're attending by device, if you wish to speak during public comments, click raise hand at the bottom of your window during the item you wish to speak on. Your microphone will be unmuted when you are called to speak. Your microphone will be deactivated once your comment time has lapsed. If you're attending by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. You will be called by your partially displayed phone number, so please listen for that number. The host will unmute you and remute you once your time has elapsed. Please state your name and address when giving public comment. Board members are asked to identify if they are here in person or remotely when roll call is given. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Strom.
Here.
Vice Chair Roberts.
Here in person.
Board Member Massing.
Here remotely.
Board Member Mathers.
Here.
Board Member Della Vega. Board Member Herbach.
Here.
Board Member Rich.
Mr. Rich is currently unmuting. Stand by.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Sir.
Was that a yes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Please,
Okay.
please indicate how you are attending for the record.
I'm attending remotely.
Thank you, Campbell. We have a comment on the minutes. Lee, go ahead.
Yes, they had two corrections on the minutes. So on page 10 of 267, on both of those motions for number 2, the words "take care of the" should be deleted and replaced by "repair existing, comma, replace existing, comma, or install new," for both of those motions. And on page 13 of 267, under the motion number 5, the words 120% of the AMI maximum for 10 years should be deleted and should be replaced with "maximum rent for 10 years will be 30% of 120% of the AMI. And I move approval of the minutes with those changes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor of the approval with the notes, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, they pass. Do we have any comments from the public on non-agenda items? Any remote comments?
Seeing none, sir.
Do we have any comments from board members?
No.
Any remote comments, board members? Non-agenda items?
No.
Okay. We have 4 items on the agenda tonight. The first 2 are going to be continued, so I'll just read off the ordinances, and we're going to just make a motion to continue those to the next meeting. Ordinance number 2443-2020 and ordinance 2444-2020. Do we have a motion to continue?
I have a
So
motion.
moved.
Both of those till July 16th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Board Member Rich.
Yes.
Board Member Mathers.
Yes.
Board Member Herbach.
Yes.
Board Member Massing.
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts.
Yes.
Chair Strom.
Yes. Okay, our third agenda item is Bridgeview Residential Plan Unit Development. It is ordinance 2437-2020, and this is a quasi-judicial hearing. Do any board members have any ex parte communications to disclose on this board item?
No.
Okay, seeing none. All those giving testimony, please stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn in. Mike, are you going to swear him in?
Oh,
Or
I'm sorry. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Other. I let the record reflect all 5 testified affirmatively, and if you could please state your name at the time of testifying so we can keep track on the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Sorry about that.
All right. Staff, will you please present your testimony, including any evidence in your recommendation regarding the case?
Thank you, Chair. Stephen Mayer for the record, Development Department. The item before you is ordinance 2437-2020. It's an ordinance of the City of Stewart amending the future land use map from a county land use designation to city commercial, from county commercial office residential to city multifamily density residential. It's for a 15.88 acre parcel. Also, there would be a concurrent rezoning of the property to RPUD from COR 1 from the county, and approval of a site plan concurrently that establishes 212 multifamily units within 2 4-story apartment buildings. The location of the property is on the northwest corner of South Canner Highway and Southwest Martin Highway, which is the bridge over at the continuation of where Indian Street intersects with Canner. It is a vacant parcel. It is south of the Riverland community, and it would be west of where the new Cleveland Clinic was built. That's the subject property. And it's 15.8 acres. This applicant request is for a large-scale future land use map amendment and rezoning to residential multifamily and RPUD. The current zoning is within the county. It was annexed last year without having the land use and zoning of the property at that time. It has an existing site plan approval within the county for 99,000 square feet of office use, which is 2 stories over parking for a total of 3 stories. The proposed use is 212 multifamily apartments on 4 stories in 2 buildings. The density works out to be with 212 dwelling units at 15.88 acres of total land to be 13.35 dwelling units per acre, which is under the PUD 15 units by right for a PUD. So they would not need to request for any kind of density bonuses outside of what is normally in a PUD allowed. So the proposed multifamily land use, you can see the designation there is commercial, office, residential, and they're applying for a mixed, multifamily land use designation. And the zoning designation of COR 1 would then become RPUD, Residential Plan Unit Development. Now, when staff analyzed the request, the site plan and the landscape plan, we noted 4 waivers to code. One of them, and I've outlined them on this screen, section 6.0302 are drainage specifications that require the finished floor elevation to be 18 inches over the crown of the road, the frontage, road frontage, which would be Canner Highway. The finished floor elevation proposed is 8.25, which is even below the 9-foot elevation at Canner. This is justified in their drainage statement. It is, I note, is 2 feet over the FEMA flood elevation, so that does not require, it does meet FEMA flood elevations, it just doesn't meet the 2 feet, 18 inches over the crown of the road. That's one waiver request. The second waiver request is section 6.0113, which is off-street parking schedule. The applicant is using an overall ratio of 1.6 for all units rather than using a 1.5 and a 2 parking spaces per unit for the bedrooms. They're based on a number of bedrooms. One studio apartments and one would be parked at 1.5 normally. And then the 2 and 3 bedrooms would be normally parked at 2 parking spaces per unit. What they would like to do in terms of sharing or just mixing of all those types of uses is to use a ratio of 1.6, which they will talk about the justification and how their market studies show that 1.6 works. The third is section 6.0406, which is land use transitions and landscape buffers. There is a 25-foot landscape buffer that the applicant is proposing on the north side of the property. It transitions from multifamily to single-family resident use. In our code, it requires 55-foot landscape transitional buffer, which is based on the fact that it's 4 stories. It adds 10 feet for every story from initial 25 feet. Now, in mitigation of this, or in response to this waiver request, the applicant is doubling the amount of landscaping within that 25-foot. And I would note that the sight line distance and not the physical distance is 96.87 feet from the property line to the building. And I want to make that clarification because the physical distance is more like 80 feet. But that 80 feet distance, the closest that the building is to the property, is through the wetland. So if you were to take a line that was not through the wetland, but of actual sight line distance, it would be 90. It would be 96. So I'm going to make sure that's clear. The applicant will also be talking about that buffer and what they plan to do, and I will also actually get a little bit into it in my presentation as well. Section 5.0302 is wetland protection standards. There is a minimum 50-foot wetland setback buffer. The applicant in one location, although they are meeting the 75-foot average also requirement, in one location, the applicant is requesting a 42.4-foot wetland setback buffer between the wetland line and where there is a required landscaping for the parking area. And one of the things that the applicant has done to mitigate that is that 10-foot area that separates the wetland buffer and the parking area will be 100% native vegetation strip. And it's a 10-foot area that really then, if you include that as part of the wetland buffer, would actually push that over the 50 feet required. We're going to get a little bit into where those are on the plans. So this is the site plan, and where you'll see those are the buildings in red, and that's where you would basically see where the finished floor elevation waiver would be impacting is those buildings. The parking waiver request would be for the blue highlighted area where they're placing the parking. And automatically what you also will see when I highlight where the wetlands are, you can see where the site constraints of the site is that on the southern side, they're fairly pinched forward. There's not a lot of space to actually even be able to put buildings up to a setback. So most of their building envelope is actually towards the north of the property. Now this pinch point right there is where the 42 feet is a waiver request is being requested for the wetland buffer. You can see where the parking is coming closer to the wetlands as than 50 feet. And we'll go into a little bit more of a detail. And then the transitional buffer is this area here in green. This would be where there would be normally 55 feet required, and the applicant is providing 25. Now I want to go to that first. And so the landscape plan shows where they have the 25-foot landscape buffer, which they are providing twice as much vegetation than would normally be required, even in a 55-foot space. So they're putting that all into a very dense location on the northern side in order to help with the site impact of the buildings to the Riverland Mobile Home Park. And that's where there's basically a distance requirement of 55, but that doesn't necessarily mean in our code that 55 would be full of landscape vegetation. In our code, actually, it requires only 25% of that buffer be screened with landscaping. And they are actually exceeding that. And this is a detail, I mean, not a detail, but a little bit more zoomed in so you can truly see the buffer we're talking about. And that's the sight line that I was referring to. That's 96.8 feet from the actual building. And that's well outside the 55-foot transitional buffer as well. So when you think about what they're actually asking for in this waiver request, it's to allow for the parking within that 55 feet, as well as a lift station that they identified over around this corner. The applicant is also providing for it says on your site plan, and this was as of the time of the agenda item, that they are providing a 6-foot screen wall, which is actually above code. The code requires for a 6-foot fence or wall. So they are putting a wall which would provide better screening. And in their negotiations with the Riverland folks, they have agreed to, and they'll talk to you about a request to make that a 10-foot wall, which is what the Riverland community would like. So I want to point that out, and that should be noted that that will be a change that they're requesting, is a 10-foot rather than a 6-foot screen wall. The other part of the landscape plan, which will show the native vegetation between the parking area and the wetland buffer. And that is located right here in this choke point area, which is only 42.4 feet, but with the additional 10 feet of native vegetation would be over the 50. The architectural renderings are on the screen now. Staff is recommending approval of the architectural elevations as meeting our commercial standards. They have plenty. They have the type of architectural features we're looking for. This is an architectural rendering. They'll probably show you. The applicant will probably show you a little more in their application, in their presentation, actually. So staff recommends that the local planning agency approve ordinance 2437/2020, assigning the RPUD zoning district with the site plan approval and the conditions therein for the 15.88 acre parcel. Staff reserves any time for questions that you may have of staff, but the applicant is here with a presentation. If you would wish, you can hear the application presentation now.
Thanks, Steve. Let's please hear from the applicant.
Stephen, do you page through or do I?
You can page through.
It's not going through Zoom.
Normally you click on that, but because of the technology these days, we have to do it a little bit different so that the people online can see it.
Okay.
Honestly, I had to send you a Stewart article on us and the one you sent me from Canada. I'm like, where has he been under a rock?
No screen share. You have to stop sharing the old one. There you go.
That is loading up. You press and test it right now. That's nice. It actually worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Troy Holloway. I'm with Gentile Glass Holloway O'Mahony and Associates. We're here on behalf of our client, Atlantic Realty Partners, Inc., for the Bridgeview project. Stephen did cover a lot of the kind of upfront stuff I had, but we are requesting a future land use amendment to multifamily residential rezoning to a residential land unit development, RPUD. And approval of a site plan to allow for a construction of 212 multifamily development on a 15.88 acre undeveloped parcel of land currently located in your city. Sounds good. Just some dates. We did annex into the city of Stuart in October 2019. We met right after that. We started meeting with the folks at Riverland in December. And we've pretty much been meeting with them off and on through December, at least been in touch and in contact with them, trying to resolve their issues and any problems that they may have. And I think we've resolved a lot of their concerns and issues. And here we are tonight. And then after tonight, hopefully we'll go to two more readings with the City Commission. This is the parcel. Steve did show you where it's at. It is on the northwest corner of Canner Highway in the Veterans Memorial Bridge. To the north of the parcel there is the Riverland Mobile Home Park. This aerial does not show it, but to the east is the Cleveland Clinic. And then in the southeast corner, we have the mobile gas station 7-Eleven. To the south, we have some vacant, currently vacant uplands and wetlands. And then the property does also border the St. Lucie River to the west. The site is 15.88 acres. You can see how many, basically how large that wetland is in the green. The rest of the land is the existing uplands. I'll just quickly go over these as well. This is the future land use map for the city and our parcel down in the bottom. To future land use change, we're requesting there from the COR, commercial office, residential, to the multifamily residential. And this is the city of Stuart zoning map. Again, changing the existing from the existing zoning of COR1 to R3 RP.
It's very hard to hear him.
I do.
Thank you.
This is the overall site plan. I do have a couple blow-ups. It's kind of hard to see at this scale, but overall, you can see on Canner Highway, we do have one point of single ingress and egress for the property coming in off of Canner. And then we have the two 4-story apartment buildings. One on Canner Highway, U-shaped, and which is U-shaped and kind of surrounding some pool amenities. And then the other 4-story building here sitting on the wetland upland preserve. Basically their amenity is all of this. To the south of those buildings, we have a recreation area down on the southeast corner, which is a recreation area for the tenants of the buildings. We also provide for a fully planted bioretention area, which would be for the stormwater, which would be nestled in here between the uplands and the bridge itself. We have also made sure we planned this so that there is currently a wildlife crossing in the bridge. We've made sure that we provided a nice wide upland buffer at this point so the wildlife can still continue to pass underneath this memorial bridge. And again, this is our wetland buffer, the kind of the darker green, which has a 75-foot average width. And then our wetland limits, that is the limits of the wetland that we are not touching. We're staying well away from that, not impacting the wetland at all, which is 5.44 acres. And lastly, we've shown here a kind of a possible 6-foot raised boardwalk. That will have to be permitted through South Florida Water Management. We'd really like to do that. It's just hard to say whether or not South Florida will allow us to do it. Kind of the one point is it'll be a raised boardwalk, which would then leave the property and continue out to the water, which would have just a small fishing gazebo. It could be really nice, used by the tenants. Could have some interpretive signage along that boardwalk. It would be great for the residents there. This is a blow up of the north section, the north half of the property. Again, you can see this is our left turn in from Cantor, coming through the existing median opening that was just kind of recently modified on Cantor Highway. We lined our driveway up with that. And when you come into the first building, building 1 on Cantor, there is a mailroom there. That's where the leasing office would be. This whole section, the first floor, is also a clubhouse for the residents as well. And you can see in this area, this is a large amenity area for the residents. It also accesses from the back side of the clubhouse. It's a large, very large lap pool. They'll have a covered pavilion out there, grilling areas for the residents, and very large sun decks as well. There's also some nice garden walks and garden paths that would go around inside that courtyard area. Again, then we have building number 2, which fronts onto that upland green and the wetland buffer, and then the boardwalk, which comes out of building number 2. We have a 10 to 11 foot, we have a 10-foot minimum. I think we've tried to maintain about 11 feet between the upland buffer and our building. And 100% of that area will be fully planted with all native plantings. There'll be no grass, no sod in there other than native plantings. And again, this is the 25-foot buffer that we've provided. We're also providing an 8-foot black polyvinyl chain link fence that will start at the eastern edge of the upland buffer and go to our property limits. It won't go to the water because our property limits do not go out that far. And then from that point to the east, we have proposed a 10-foot screen wall. Our initial submittal showed that is 6 feet. And then after that, I think Riverland has some discussions with the city, and they wanted that upgraded to 8. And then just the last few days, I think, to a week, it's just been upgraded to 10 feet at their request. So some of the documents don't quite reflect that 10 feet at this point. And we are also proposing, currently there's a 6-foot concrete walk along Cantor Highway. We're proposing to widen that out to 8 feet. This is the southern half of the property. Again, there's the two buildings there to the north, to the top of the graphic. And down here in the south is the recreation area. That would have a top lot with shade sails, a pickleball court, a bocce ball court, and some additional open areas for kids and dogs to play as well for the tenants. There will also be a maintenance building and a covered car wash at this point, along with the trash compactor for the complex. Again, here's our fully planted bioretention in this area at this point. And then you can see again the upland buffer and the wetland, the unimpacted wetlands. Also, one last thing, we provided a gateway signage feature here on the southeast corner. In the beginning, we talked to staff, and they'd like to see some gateway signage feature, which I do provide a little elevation later. As you can see, they would provide signage for the development and also then for the city of Stuart as well. Just some overall site data. Again, it's 212 units, which has a density of 13.35 dwelling units per acre. There's a mix of units. There's 4 different unit types. We have studio apartments, 20 of those. There's 88 1-bedroom, 84 2-bedroom, and 20 3-bedroom units. The allowable density for this project would be total 476 units, or 30 units per acre, where we are well below that. Our building lot coverage is only 9.9%, 30% maximum is allowable. The open space provided is 67%, 30% is the minimum required. Again, our existing wetland is 5.44 acres, 100% undisturbed. Our upland preserve provided is 2.97 acres. 2.23 acres is required, so we exceed that as well. And the developed footprint, which is all the area that we are developing, building, parking, recreation, is 7.47 acres, so it's only 47% of the overall site. The rest of it will be preserved as wetlands and uplands. This is the gateway signage feature I was just mentioning at the southeast corner. Again, this would provide signage for the community as well as for the city of Stuart. We have a signage there with some logo, the city of Stuart logo. We have an overhead trellis, and also the walkway itself goes underneath the trellis and goes underneath the feature. So it does come into the property and provide for some amenity feature there as well. And then behind that, we have some jewel palms and cabbage palms and some crepe myrtles to provide some color and some bougainvillea as well. I got 3 renderings here. This is the first building that faces Caner Highway. This kind of, you can see from this, kind of the architectural style here is a kind of a Florida coastal, British West Indies architectural style. There's a mix of roof types here. They have standing seam metal roof and asphalt shingles. They have balconies on the building, on the fronts and the backs. I think 90 or 95% of units all have balconies. Not every one of them do, but most of them. The finishes on the building are smooth painted stucco, along with simulated clapboard siding. This is the same building, just a different view along Caner Highway. Again, the studio, we have the studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. They range in sizes from 580 square feet to 1,360 square feet. That is under air. They have an integrated leasing office, fitness center. The mailroom is internal to the building. They provide also a club lounge, catering kitchen, and business center for the residents as well. And this, lastly, is this is a view facing north, facing Riverland. So this would be building 1, and then building 2 in the back, facing the upland and wetland. This direct facing west. So you can see there's plenty of balconies, very large corner balconies. So the building just has nice diversity, nice colors, very natural. This is our first waiver. This is for the buffer requirement. And as Stephen mentioned, we are requesting a waiver for this, but the code is kind of gray. We feel that we still meet the intent of the code, but we did request a waiver. Your code does require that the buffer width required for multifamily abutting single family or multifamily is 25 feet, plus an additional 10 feet for each upper story. In our case, 3 upper stories, which provides a 55-foot buffer width required. And then your code goes on to say that buffer use in that buffer, and no structures, mechanical equipment, trash receptacles, parking areas, or internal driveways shall be located in the buffer within 15 feet of the property line, which we also meet. It goes on to say that a buffer shall include a buffer screen, the width of which is 25% of the width of the required buffer. So in our case, 25% of the 55 feet is 13.75 feet. The buffer screen shall include at a minimum a 6-foot wall or fence with a 5-foot wide landscape area located along the property line. We're proposing a fully landscaped 25-foot landscape buffer, not with a 6-foot wall, but a 10-foot wall. This is a cross section looking east of this is our north buffer at this point. This is building 1. I know Stephen mentioned he was showing, I think, 98 or 96 feet from building 2. This is a section we did from building 1 across the parking lot over to our north buffer. This building itself, which had kind of the largest building face and balconies facing Riverland, so we took this section. 154 feet from the north property line. In that buffer, again, here is the wall, which would be essentially the face of the wall would be about 1 foot off of the property line. In that buffer, the trees required are 14. Trees and palms provided, 101. The minimum tree height required is 12 feet. We're providing 16 and 20-foot oaks, 12 to 16-foot pines, and 16 to 25-foot palms. The shrubs required is 209, and we're providing 2,121. So we greatly exceed the quantities. We've packed, there is no sod. It's all understory as well as all 100% native all the way. So there's no grass, no sod, no St. Augustine in that buffer. This is a line of the previously approved plan that was approved through Martin County. As you can see, that's the building outline, which was approved at 52 feet from the north property line. And this slide here kind of shows that as well. That's the approved building when it was in Martin County, the 3 stories at 52 feet. They had a 40-foot drainage easement. And one big difference here as well is that the wall wasn't on the property line, it was located outside of this easement, which really didn't help the views for Riverland at all. Waiver number 2, which is for the finished floor elevations. Your code states the finished first floor elevations of all buildings or structures shall not be lower than the higher of the following elevations. 2 feet above the flood stage elevation established by FEMA, or 18 inches above the crown of the street on which the buildings or structures front. Obviously, we can't be 18 inches above the bridge, and Keener Highway is at 9 feet. We don't believe that this code reference is applicable to this project and specifically the site, because the finished floor of the buildings will be more than 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation. The site will be permitted to meet South Florida management permitting requirements. And in the unlikely event that the off-site floodwaters do drain to the site, the floodwaters will naturally continue to flow to the west around the buildings through the wetland and discharge into the St. Lucie River, since this parcel does abut the river. Waiver number 3 is the off parking requirement. Parking required by your code for multifamily dwellings. Studios or 1-bedroom apartments require 1.5 spaces per unit. Oops, I'm sorry. That's there. Wrong button. 2 or more bedrooms require 2 spaces per unit. So we have a total parking of 370 spaces, or 1.75 spaces per unit required. We're providing 342 spaces, or 1.61 spaces per unit. 1.61 spaces per unit works for Atlantic Realty Partners, who will own this project. We did provide, I didn't show it on here, we did provide some documentation for staff where Atlantic owns 5 other projects, similar projects throughout the country, and this one actually has more spaces than those other 5 projects do. The site is self-contained. Should the site ever become overparked, there are no abutting parcels that would essentially accommodate vehicles to park off-site. So Bridgeview would be forced to rectify the problem, or their leasing would be negatively impacted. So it's not like there's a shopping center next door where people could start parking and making a nuisance. Many residents will likely work also across the street at the Cleveland Clinic and will probably walk to work. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, the ITE, has conducted 48 plus studies of similar multifamily housing projects in urban suburban settings with no nearby rail transit similar to this site. And they have found the peak parking demand to be an average of 1.32 parking spaces per dwelling unit. So we fall above that. So we're kind of in between ITE and the city stewards standards requirements. The last waiver we've got here is for the wetland protection standard for the buffer, the upland buffer around the wetland. Your code requires that the minimum average width of an upland buffer around an outstanding resource wetland, which this is, shall be 75 feet and at no point less than 50. Our justification for that is the site plan provides a required 75-foot average width, and at one point where the wetland extends a finger to the east, creating that narrow upland between the wetland and Keener Highway, it results in a very small portion of the upland buffer going down to 42.4 feet, which is below the 50. This only results in a total reduction square footage of 285 feet of upland buffer. And as I mentioned earlier, the entire buffer between the upland and the development, the buildings and the parking, that entire area will be completely landscaped 100% with 100% native plantings, live oaks, slash pines, cabbage palms, and native grasses. This is a graphic here kind of showing the area basically that is impacted. That would have been the 50-foot setback line from the wetland line. So that's 285 feet where we just couldn't quite preserve all of it because of the parking, and then we have a 6-foot sidewalk at this point. And then kind of overlaying that, that's the landscape plan. So yeah, as you can see, it is fully landscaped. So we have definitely, I would say, fully mitigated that 285 feet that we just wasn't possible to preserve in place. The traffic analysis, the previous Martin County approval for 99,000 square feet for for the office building had 946 daily external trips, 108 AM peak hour, and 102 PM peak hour trips. The current plan for the 212 units provides for 1,154 daily trips, slightly more than the office plan had. But the morning peak hour and PM peak hour are less. We only have 71 AM peak hour and 91 PM peak hour. So we've got 208 more daily trips than they had, but our AM and peak hour trips are less as the traffic throughout the day is dispersed, where the office building basically had a peak. Everybody would come in the morning for work, and then they'd all leave basically at the same time. And there is adequate transportation capacity available to serve the project with a maximum impact of only 1.9% to Cantor Highway. A turn lane is not warranted or recommended by FDOT. FDOT requires turn lanes when right turn movements exceed 80 to 125 vehicles per hour. Bridgeview is estimated to only have 9 AM and 28 PM peak hour inbound right turns. So we're well below the 80 to 125 vehicles. And the last slide, in conclusion, our request for future land use amendment, rezoning, and site plan approval is compatible with the surrounding property uses. We do provide the city with a much needed residential use for the local workforce, young professionals and families, while preserving and protecting the surrounding natural resources. The site plan meets all city code requirements with the exception of the 4 minor waivers being requested. The proposed landscaping meets and exceeds Stewart's code, particularly along the perimeter buffers. It provides a compatible, quality 4-story, non-invasive infill project in the city of Stewart. It also provides for an ad valorem tax base increase from the current annual tax of approximately $14,700 to around $220,000 annual tax increase. And Bridgeview will provide the city with a highly desirable and marketable housing type within a community close to and walkable to surrounding medical and retail services, parks, and large potential employer base across the street. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay, at this time, we will go to the board with questions. Who would like to start? Anybody remote want to start? Okay, we're going to go with Lee.
We'll let you all start.
Hi.
Hi.
So let's talk about a few things.
Sure.
The first thing, can you go back to your presentation, the page right before your conclusion? Let me go to that.
You gotta
one
reshare
first.
it.
I don't know who's driving. Okay. Get in.
If Lee is speaking, we can't hear her on Zoom. This is Jordan.
That will help, Jordan. Sorry.
Oh,
I
I couldn't hear anything though at all.
neither
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Good.
Thank you.
So you're saying that the right turns into the property in the afternoon will be people coming, say, from Stewart, and there'll be 28 out of the 91 peak hour turns that are going in. 28 of those are going in from downtown Stewart, correct?
Correct.
That's what you're saying. And
Yes.
the balance of them will all be coming
From the south.
from the south. All right. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify
And
that.
that is from our traffic engineer. not
Right.
from
I
myself.
understand. I understand. So let me ask a few questions. These are rental, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How do people get their trash from their home to the compactor?
I think it is a valet. and valet.
Okay. Your mail is being picked up next to where the clubhouse is,
It's inside the building.
inside building 1 next to where the clubhouse is.
Yes.
So are there designated parking spaces outside for people? I know that the very first space, if I come into the property, make the little loop, and then kind of go to the left, the very first space on the right-hand side is a handicap space. I think in your picture you had a van parked in there in the handicap space. But are you anticipating that some of those spaces will be reserved for mail pickup?
Yes, I thought we showed 1 or 2 mailroom parking spaces. And as the mailroom is in the building, they don't have a lot of people that just park and go get their mail as they're basically in the same building as the mailroom.
Okay, so I didn't see that. Do you have that in your plans? I don't see it on any of mine.
It's on the SP. It does show the 1 mail pickup. Page is this?
I'm looking at MP1.
Look at SP1. Thanks.
Really? LP2, hang on.
Or you could just take his word for it.
Okay, I got the SP. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. So there's 1 space right next to the handicap space that's for mail pickup. Is that what you're seeing, Ryan?
That's what I see.
You see 1 space.
Yes.
For 212 units, I don't know if that would be enough. That's just a comment, right? So you have 1 designated space.
We can.
That's
definitely
fine. Well,
look at
hang
that.
on, we'll come back to that. Will the parking be assigned? Will there be any assigned parking for anybody? Or is it going to be a free-for-all?
It's gonna be a free-for-all. Sometimes we will allow reserved parking, purchase of.
You have to come up and you have to speak into the microphone, and the chair should have told you that, but he didn't, and you have to state your name for the record. Thank you.
This is Steve Seeley with
Okay.
Atlantic Realty Partners.
Okay, and now repeat your comment into the microphone so that
So
folks
we
at home can
do-
hear you.
So we have not confirmed which way we're going to go with it, but typically what we'll do is not have any reserved parking and select a few designated premium spaces that will allow certain residents that live near those spaces to purchase.
And they'll be buying those, or they'll be renting those spaces. Is that the
Correct.
plan? Okay, all right. If I understand you correctly, your wall ends where your buffer begins. Is that correct? Where the
That's
wetland buffer begins?
Correct.
And if we can go back to the sightline picture, the driver. So the sightline picture, I measured your little man. Your little man is like just over 5 feet tall.
Yeah, we
He's
usually
a
try
little
to show him
short guy.
a 6.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're trying to show him a 6.
Well, at the top of his head maybe
Okay,
was
yes.
6, but you had the thing coming in about 6 inches below. So I
Yes,
guess
his
he
eyes.
has a very long
Big
forehead.
forehead, yes.
Yeah. So if you figure that the man is about 5 feet tall, my point that I wanted to understand or make was that when you double the size of the man, up again, that one, when you double the size of the man, so I see your V-shaped piece, that's your line of sight piece.
Yes.
When you double the size of the height of the man on the property line, on the edge of where those trees are, it almost completely encompasses his line of sight piece. Do you understand what I'm saying? Correct? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Kevin Freeman.
Okay. So your line of sight window, the very top, if you had a taller man, the taller man standing where the short man is standing,
Oh, from the Riverland side.
from the Riverland
Yes.
side, it would meet up to that. Okay.
Ms. Roberts,
Yes.
could I just, Kevin Freeman for the record, bear in mind also that the wall now is proposed to be 10 feet.
Right. And that's what I was doing. I was doing a 10-foot
Yes.
piece. So like a 5.5 foot up to his eyes man, and then a 6 inches for his forehead.
Yes.
And then you stood another one on top of him up against the property line,
Yes.
and it's at the top of that window. That was the
I think
point.
they have such residences there, yes.
Yeah, okay, all Will there be a generator for the common rooms in the clubhouse? In case there's a hurricane? Is there a plan for that?
We don't have that defined yet, but it'd be to code. Sorry. We
Um,
don't have a plan for that yet, but it'd be to code. So whatever the code requirement would be.
Right, well, I don't know if there's necessarily a code requirement, but I mean, I think it would be nice if
Typically,
you,
that's a construction code requirement. We ran into it in our deal in West Palm Beach as well.
is there a code
The
requirement for
city
that?
of Stewart has a code requirement regarding assisted living facilities,
And
but
that's
not for just a residential apartment building.
Construction code requirement is what I'm referencing.
Right, well, I was just thinking if I was one of the 212 families that was living there and a hurricane came, I would like to know that you had an air-conditioned space for me.
Right, we would likely have one. I just need to check code and I'd need to confirm with our architect and engineers to confirm what's contemplated. So
Okay. Hang on, let's talk about your landscape plan for a minute. So I marked your landscape plan for you, and I marked the things that were palms, and I marked the things that were trees, and I marked the things that were shrubs.
Okay.
All right? And then I marked the height of those. And in this strip, in the 25-foot strip that's there, that you're going to heavily landscape, for trees that are above, trees, not palms, but trees that are above 14 feet, you have 6 16-foot live oaks, 11 16-foot slash pines, and 4 20-foot live oaks. So I know you had other trees here and there, but you really don't have a lot of real tall things. I know that in one place you're saying that you will have trees that are 12 to 20 feet tall, but the only 20, you have 4 live oaks that are 20 feet tall. I mean, just didn't know whether that was something. I mean, it looks like a lot because when you look at it, it's all on top of each other. But the part that's a lot is really the shrub piece and some of the palms. It's not a lot of trees that are making up your lot. So I wanted to.
understand. You know, you just have to be careful. You don't want that to be too tight because then things just won't grow properly. So. I mean,
Right, and I
would-
think that's the catch-22 is that when you make it that tight, you know, so you're doubling down on the landscaping, but in order to make it grow appropriately there, you can't double down with a whole lot of real tall trees. But I
No.
just want everybody to understand that what is proposed in the landscaping plan isn't necessarily a whole lot of really tall trees on that piece, because on one hand, you're emphasizing I've got some really tall trees over there before your 10-foot wall came into play. But at the same time, it really isn't that many.
Sure, yeah, we also
really
have
tall
some smaller understory trees as well.
Okay, I noticed that in the development restrictions, there was nothing about construction times.
There is-
anybody-
There is.
There is code.
Where is that?
It's,
What number was that, Ryan?
On one page.
I think the code provides 7 a.m. till 7 p.m.
7 to 6, Monday through
That was
Saturday.
in the
Yes.
next one. That's
7.
not in this one. It's in the next one, but I didn't find it in this one. So I
As a
really think,
PUD condition,
as a PUD condition.
we have code of ordinances that restrict.
Sometimes the PUD will extend or change those, but if it's not in the condition, then it's to code. So it's not deviating from code, so they'd have to follow the code, which does have timeframes.
So we put it in the other one, but we didn't put it in this one.
So, yeah, sometimes the applicant puts it in because they want insurances, and sometimes we put it in if depending on where the location, sometimes someone will ask for an extra hour or something like that, depending on the
Okay.
conditions.
Okay, thanks. Your air conditioning things, are they on top of the building? Are they?
Yes, on the roof.
Your picture that you have that's showing your elevation that you're showing from the street on the east side,
Okay.
I think is somewhat, keep going. I like that, by the way, but keep going. One more. One more. That one. I think that's somewhat deceptive because those palm trees that you have there are date palms
Yeah, well, yeah.
that
the
are
lands-
12 feet high, and
Well-
those are
Well, none of the landscaping on this plan matches up. I mean, this plan has, I mean, look at our buffer's got, I don't know, 4 trees.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was mainly for the architecture here, not to represent.
Okay,
the
so I
landscape.
really don't have, so let me give you thank you for your elevations. Thank you for showing us what your parking benches and what all that stuff would look like. Thank you for your gateway signage. Thank you for the City of Stewart listed up there. I think all that's great. I really don't have a problem with your 42-foot buffer piece, because I think that if you look at that piece, if you took 2 parking spaces and deleted 2 parking spaces and moved them somewhere else, you could really make that work. You could really make it. I mean, if somebody forced your hand on that, you could really make it the 50 feet with the 10-foot landscape piece on the other side of it without too much of a difficulty, just by, you know what I mean, just by bumping that out, because it really only affects 2 of your parking places. So I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't really have a problem with your buffer, especially with the 10-foot wall. And surprisingly, I really don't have a problem with your off-street parking, because I really don't think that that's going to be an issue because you're so contained. I think the people who may someday get mad at you will be the Cleveland Clinic people, if your people are trying to park over there and walk across the street. But I think they're pretty good at policing their area, so I really don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with the height, though. And I'm leaving car charging for you. I have it on my thing, but I'm leaving it for you. I do have a problem with the height, because when you look at the height of that building, even though it's 45 feet to the eaves, it's 60 feet overall. And I did figure out that, yeah, you're going to be a little bit lower because you're using the 18.5 inch instead of the 2 feet above, the 18.5 inches instead of the 2 feet above. So that drops you down a couple feet. But 60 feet is pretty high, is pretty high. So I didn't know if anybody else had a problem with that. Let me think if I had anything else. I think the development condition number 9 should add that it's a 10-foot wall, and should also add, I mean, this is just cleanup. It's not part of a motion or anything, but I think in cleaning it up, it should, if they're agreeing to a 10-foot wall and they're agreeing to it starting at the eastern edge of the buffer, I think that it should say that that's where the wall is starting, so that everybody kind of understands that's where it is. And let me see if there's anything else. Hang on. Thank you for your patience.
Sure, no problem. I'm here all night.
You might be.
Very funny. You noted, I guess it's staff's note on page 40, that the north-facing balconies, on the building closest to Riverland Park have been removed. Staff notes that the applicant has removed north-facing balconies from the building closest to Riverland Park. North-facing balconies remain on the second building. So the second, I think that needs to, the second, what are you calling the second building? You got them backwards, right?
Second building would be the one that's closest to the Riverland.
Then you just contradicted yourself if that's true. Because I'm understanding that your north-facing balconies will not happen on the V-shaped building, but
Right.
will be on the U-shaped building.
That's correct.
And the U-shaped building is building 1,
Yes.
and the V-shaped building is building 2. So I think your note, it didn't make sense. And that I think is all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Mike?
Okay, let me flip over what I have my notes. I looked at the pool and I didn't see any bike racks. I might have missed it, but
Oh, I have those.
are there some there? Okay. Even kids in the neighborhood are gonna drive their bicycles to the pool. Are they there? Somehow I missed them.
They're on the 2 middle parts of the U-shaped building, the ends of the U's. They're
Right.
both,
Okay.
on those pieces, yeah.
See those.
Mr. Herbart, can you pull your microphone?
I mentioned also the mail pickup, one car, but I guess it's gonna be inside so people could walk there and it's not.
Yes, they're internal.
Okay. One of my, that I bring up every meeting is electrical vehicle charging stations. We don't have an ordinance yet, but we're working on it, but it's gonna happen. And I have two issues with it as far as what people have to work out. If you pre-install them, you can't, the state statute says you can't park in those spots unless you're plugged in. It's like a handicap spot. But I would suggest that a certain percentage, you put the dedicated panel on the wall so we know that will happen. It's cheaper, a lot cheaper. And you have the races, or people call it the conduit, somewhere out in the parking lot. And they're capable of a level 2 charge. A level 1 is a extension cord. It could take days. A level 2 is a dryer plug. And I'd like to see, I don't know, a percentage of those pre-wired, or otherwise it's a mess. If you got to put the panel on the wall, you got to trench it. If it's asphalt or sidewalk, it's a mess.
Yeah, they plan to have at least, I think, they plan to provide a couple spaces, but they will provide the infrastructure for those, and they'll provide more as the need, as basically as demand.
What the industry seems to state is 5% of the parking.
Which
It sounds like they're in agreement. I think they can get with staff and we can come back with that for sure when it
Okay.
goes to the commission.
But you will put some in?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get that from you. Thank you. Let's see. I have one question that I didn't quite understand it. I guess it was my thing. The north wall, you say fence and you say wall.
Yeah, we're showing, well, because we have basically the wetland, the existing wetland goes to the property line, so we
Okay.
really don't want to wall that off.
Oh, okay, to
So
pull
that
that.
would be a chain link fence.
All
And
right.
then essentially from the area that we're kind of recreating, that would be wall.
Okay, I didn't catch that.
And it's, I mean, it's so thick. You hate to
let me
wall
see.
that off.
I guess that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Larry, do you have anything?
I do. I have one question on the construction type. It's identified as 3A. Is that going to be facilitated by frame or by masonry?
All the plans right now are done as it's called out, all the floor plans call out CMU. And the plans at this point are for I think it's tubular, what is it called, Steve? Yeah, CMU, but it's, I guess they call it a tunnel form, so it'd be concrete and steel. And the plan indicate that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Campbell, do you have anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So I'm looking at trying to understand the details of the variance regarding the elevation. So I'm looking at page 133 of 267, which is from Mackenzie Engineering and Planning. So we're granting you an exception to 6.0302B for finished floor elevations. So the site, you're saying the site varies in height from 3 to 10 feet in elevation. How far above, how much higher is the first floor elevation as compared to the parking lots?
Oh boy, is Sean, our engineer Sean, hopefully is on.
Sean was not sworn.
Our engineer.
Yeah, John chose not to participate in this hearing, but we can swear him in now if he's available and you guys want to call him as a witness. Can we do that?
Yes, stand by. Sure. He can answer this a lot better than I can.
Okay.
Normally to be sworn.
I mean, if the parking lots are 3 feet and Canner Highway is 9 to 10 feet, that's an awfully large gradient. I'm just wondering, are the parking lots going to become just this huge sink for the 20 feet of rain in 10 days we just had?
Mr. Rich, if I could have their engineer, Sean, please raise his right hand.
Stand by, I'm unit.
I can see him. Okay, Sean, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Sean McKenzie with McKenzie Engineering, 1172 Southwest 30th Street, Suite 500, Palm City, Florida. And yeah, so you've got a good question there, and then we were concerned about the drainage. I mean, overall, we've got, like we said in the waiver, the buildings there at a finished floor around 8.25, but the parking lot is generally going to be an inverted crown with elevations ranging from roughly probably about 7.5 down to the mid 6s, depending on where you are on the site. So then all that water will get collected in the parking lot and then sent through pipe systems south to where our retention ponds are. And then that pond will fill up and then discharge in and through the wetlands.
So that retention pond was on the southern border there, correct?
Yeah, it's
Just to the
kinda
west of the recreation.
just the west of recreation, adjacent to the Indian Street Bridge.
Okay, so that, I mean, because that is a big elevation difference from Cantor Highway, I mean.
Well, Cantor Highway being at 9 and this being at 8.25.
Or 6, right? Some of the parking areas are 6 feet.
Some of the parking areas and some of the corners do dip below 7. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So, you know, one of the challenges that we'll have is right there at the entrance coming off Cantor Highway, you know, making sure that we can accommodate vehicles safely coming in and through. So we've got a plan already designed to work through those issues.
Because that wetland to the west is upland, right?
It's pretty wet. I mean, you've got elevations there in the wetland that vary from, you know, 3 or 4 to lower.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, at the, you know, sort of border of our property where we meet the San Lucie River, we see elevations at 0 to -2.
Okay. Question, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Campbell. I wanted to follow up on Larry's question about the CMU. I was going to ask the same question. I noticed, and I'm happy that you're doing it in CMU. We've seen some other apartments going up that are all frame and they're delaminating as they're going up, it looks like. On your A2 elevation keynote, it does mention fiber cement trim over building wrap on exterior sheathing. So I'm thinking maybe that's a typo.
Well, I mean, they're doing the plank siding.
I think they're doing this simulated stucco is what I would, based on your presentation, it sounded like a simulated stucco, whereas this makes it sound like you're doing the hardy plank over sheeting.
Well, there is, over sheeting. I think it would be the sheeting on the concrete. There is sheeting.
I can't hear him.
Barbie can't hear you. You have to come up there.
Response.
There is sheathing as a part of the stucco system.
So, but
Our architect should be on as well. And you need to say your name.
My name is Steve Seeley with Atlantic Realty Partners.
okay. Typically, when you do the hardy plank, you direct apply it to the block. So the sheeting comment is what kind of made me think it was more going to be frame versus block. So it sounds like you're saying it's going to be block.
Yes.
So that can be clarified. If it's still going to be hardy plank over block, that's fine. But the sheeting was what got me I was curious about that.
Yeah, I just want to see if our architect is on because he may be able to speak to that.
Okay. Great.
Christian Okendo, are you on?
What's the last name?
Okendo?
What's his phone number?
I got him.
Oh.
Billing you, so you know he's there.
Yeah.
He's going to need to be sworn in as well.
Yeah.
As soon as we find him. I have to see him. There he is. Christian, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell, no, oh wait. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
No.
So enthusiastic.
All right, so Christian Okendo from CBA Architects, Longwood, Florida. There's two potential type of construction that we will have. It's really depending on what the sub-market is. As of right now, we will have tunnel form, and then the infill is the part that kind of varies. If we do tunnel form, the infill will be metal frame, because that's the right way to actually fill the exterior of the building. If we go with a two-way concrete slab, and not to get too technical, then the exterior wall will be a bearing CMU wall. In either case, will be non-combustible material. Basically that is what is being built on the market right now. And then depending on the substrate, if it's frame, we will have sheathing for the exterior materials. If it's CMU, then we will have to come up with a different solution to provide drainage behind it. Because if you direct apply in commercial construction, if you direct apply the siding, the water just gets stuck, and then hydrostatic pressure just pushes moisture into the building, and we don't want that. So we will still have some sort of drainage plane behind the fiber cement siding. We don't necessarily love the idea of simulating the clapboard. One, is not a real material, and two, the lines and labor work, it just starts to shake, and it just doesn't look high quality product as this project is. Does that clarify?
It does. Thank you very much.
Well, I just want to point out that construction type does allow a frame structure as long as it's fire retardant. So that said, my concern is that I would like to see it, clearly a non-combustible, a 4-story non-combustible construction, as opposed to a 4-story frame structure. So when you say tunnel forming, you're talking about the column, you're talking about it like column and beam bearing elements, and then infill in between the bearing elements you're talking about?
So tunnel form is a cast in place structure. Basically, you have walls and slabs that are poured at the same time. So you get like a grid in the facade of concrete, and then you infill in between with frame. Now, should we go with that, it wouldn't be wood frame or fire retardant. It will be metal frame, which is still non-combustible, non-bearing at that point.
Understood.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Compactor location, I'm not a huge fan just because it's right on Canner. I tried to look for other options. I know you guys probably spent some time with that. Any thoughts on potential alternate? I know part of it has to do with getting the compactor out and clearing it out. I know there's issues with that. But
Yeah, we needed to clear access. I mean, unfortunately, we did start with it on the north side, and that didn't work too well for neighbors. So we try to get as far away as possible. It is screened with a wall, so it will be screened and landscaped. You'll never know what's there or what's inside the wall.
so on the Canner Highway side, there is a wall.
Yes, it's wall. It will be a screened
The
wall.
compactor will be screen wall, or that
Yes.
whole.
Compactor, I don't know, it might be hard to see. So basically, it's got a U-shaped. It's gonna be just like a dumpster screen wall, except very long.
Okay, but there's no wall along Canner, correct?
Well,
Just landscaping.
Well, there's the screen wall for the compactor, just as a dumpster would be.
Correct. Okay. I noticed there was a comment, you are not considering any kind of workforce housing, or what do we call it now? What's the right term?
Attainable.
Attainable housing?
Not at this point. There is not.
Okay. Something that we've talked a lot about lately. We've seen a lot of apartment projects come through, but I don't necessarily think it needs to be a requirement. It's something normally it offsets some of these waivers. Hey, we're interested in maybe setting aside 5 units, but I don't want to dictate market if that's not your product. I do know that we have a speaker from Riverland here. We'll go ahead and make a motion. And then after we make a motion, before we call the roll, we're going to listen to any public comment. So before we do that, anything else, Lee?
I had one more. A bus bench?
Sorry?
A bus bench?
A bus bench?
So what happens is, I think you have 49 children that you anticipate that will be going to the public schools, which will probably be riding a bus.
Yes.
Which then means that if you if you provide a bench that you hope then they will sit on, they won't be sitting on the curb of the street with the Cantor Highway traffic going past them.
Sure, we can
And they'll
provide,
be-
we can provide them once we figure out where the school board, we did talk to them. They aren't, they.
Right,
they
but,
just
but I
stopped
think,
at
you know, I mean, I think you guys can know where the bench should be, that it goes on the eastern side of the entrance rather than on the western side of, I mean, it's that type of thing so that somebody coming out of your place doesn't take out a kid on the way. The bus is on the other side, but
And
that's.
just so I understand, I know staff's taking notes, you guys are agreeable that we'll include that before coming back to the next meeting.
Well, I'll put it in the motion.
Okay.
So
I think we need to, when we do this, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. I forgot.
When we do this, we always ask for a bench, but I think we need more than a bench because it rains in Florida and maybe a covered.
Yeah, it needs
one
to
of
be a
those
covered
bus
bench.
stop. I mean, it's not that much and the kids got paperwork, books. It really needs to be a sheltered.
They look
waiting
very sad when they're sitting out there and it's raining.
area. So,
And that reminded me of, I'm assuming there are no gates at the entrance. It's access, okay. Mr. Mathers, I forgot you.
That's quite all right. I'm fine over here. I just got a quick question for staff. Is this project the one that he's also abandoning an easement?
Yes.
Yes, we are banning in drainage.
Okay, so nobody's got any rights to it. It's, that you know of that you can abandon it, right?
I believe, yes, they are.
They're
people-
abandoning it, I think.
They're abandoning it.
Yeah, I know, but
towards the drainage.
They've
but
got to
they are-
make sure there's nobody that's got a problem with the abandonment. I assume staff, it's not that important, except I know
Yeah.
that's what's being done and Stewart's, city's going to approve that, I assume, right?
In their drainage statement, they are mitigating for the removal of the easement.
Right.
To direct the water flow to the south.
Right, yeah, I have no objection. I just want to know that, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Do we have a motion?
Sure.
Okay,
I move approval with 3 additions. One is increasing the number of designated spaces for mail pickup from 1 to 4. Installing a generator that would provide air conditioning or would provide power to the clubhouse portion in Building 1. And installing a covered bench for a covered area for buses or transit.
okay. We have a motion on the table. We are now going to take public comment.
You have a second?
Yeah, he'll
You have a
second.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
we have a second.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it, but I want to add that they'll discuss or they'll put in EV parking, electrical vehicle parking.
So I think they'd already agreed to that and I gave him that
Yeah,
notes.
we have to put it in the motion though.
Yes.
Do you want it in the motion?
You don't have to put it in the motion, it will be in the notes. We
Let's-
can amend the
let's throw it
motion
in.
accordingly. If you amend the motion, we can add it, but it doesn't have to be.
I wanna
Okay,
add
so
that.
what do you want me to add? Tell me again.
Electrical vehicle parking to be worked out with staff. Level 2.
Level 2,
Electric vehicle infrastructure.
electric
Infrastructure.
vehicle
Dedicated panel and,
infrastructure. I'm just going to say
Then
that. Level
runway.
2, electric vehicle infrastructure.
and I think we leave it a little not defined real well because they don't know where it needs it. Some fellow
Sure.
is on one end of the building, he doesn't want to put
Sure.
it on the other end.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Next, we will hear from Mr. Don Barber.
If there's anyone online who wishes to give public comment, please press raise hand now.
And Mr. Barber did state he's going to be about 6 minutes, which I'm okay with.
I will try and talk fast, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the City of Stuart Local Plan Agency, for the record, my name is Don Barber. I'm a resident and shareholder of the River Lane Cooperative located at 3500 South Cantor Highway, which is next door to the planned Bridgeview development. I am also a member of the Riverlands Bridgeview Committee, a temporary committee established by the Board of Directors per Florida Statute 710 and formed to advise the board and take action on behalf of the board in regard to the Bridgeview development. My remarks today are in that capacity and are being made on behalf of the Riverland community. In your packets is a June 10th letter from Riverland outlining a certain hopefulness that an agreement with Atlantic would be reached prior to this hearing and addressing the various security, privacy, noise abatement, crime prevention, and communication concerns of the Riverland community. I am pleased to inform you that such an agreement has been reached and a memorandum of understanding has been executed. This MOU outlines roles and responsibilities for both parties, details certain understandings regarding construction activities along the common property boundary, and provides a framework ensuring future communication. At this time, Riverland has no objections to the approval process for the Bridgeview project continuing forward. It should be noted, however, that such a statement would not have been possible a short time ago. At one point, communications between Riverland and Atlantic Corporate just broke down, and the trust and civility needed for any ongoing discussion no longer existed. We were not talking, and Riverland was talking to attorneys. It was not until the involvement of your city staff, specifically Stephen Mayer and Kevin Friedman of the Development Department, plus the active engagement of a local Atlantic contractor, Troy Holloway of Gentel Gloss, Holloway of Mahoney and Associates, that an effective dialogue was reestablished. It was that new dialogue and a healthy willingness to have some give and take that made reaching a consensus between Riverland and Atlantic possible. Yes, the elimination of the balconies on the 4th floor building 2 helped. Yes, having 50 feet of plant density and a 25-foot landscape screen helped. And yes, Atlantic's recent willingness to increase the height of the wall and fence extension along the adjoining property line to 10 feet really helped. But in the end, if this $24 million project providing badly needed housing and tax revenue to the city of Stuart actually comes into being, it will not be due to the sole actions of some distant corporate entity. It will be due, at least in part, to the involvement and professionalism of Stephen, Evan, and Troy, all who are local people. In closing, and why I'm here today representing the Riverland community, it would be incorrect for the members of the local plan agency to assume that all Riverland residents are of an identical mindset. Riverland is a community of diverse individuals, and we also very often have diverse opinions on community matters. The agreement reached with Riverland is a negotiated compromise, representing a balance between the needs of Riverland and the property rights of Atlantic. Like all compromises, everyone can find something to like or dislike. All Riverland residents, not just those within 300 feet of the property line, were encouraged just last week again to take advantage of the public comment opportunity available at this hearing should they wish to express a personal viewpoint. Should any do so, I would like to thank you in advance for allowing county residents to speak their mind at a city hearing. This concludes my remarks. I and one other member of the Riverland Committee are available to answer any questions, either now or later on in the hearing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment, either here or remote?
See none online.
Okay. Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the vote?
Be unmuted.
I'm here. I can't hear you guys though.
I can't either, Larry. I can't hear him.
I think something froze up on their end.
It's frozen.
Got an internet fluctuation.
There we go.
There you go. Massing.
That was Massing, yes.
Can you call us vote again?
Board Member Massing,
Yes.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
Chair Strom.
Yes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. So
Good luck, guys.
You've got those notes that are things that just need to be cleaned up. That don't need to bear motion notes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just like to thank Mr. Barber for taking the time and coming to speak to the LPA, and especially to express his thanks for a job well done to the staff. People are always very eager to come and complain and gripe, and it's much rare that people come to express their thanks for the effort made by both the members of the LPA and especially the staff. So I just appreciate his comments.
Thanks, Campbell. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
And he was here, Mr. Rich, and heard that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this next item, I do have a direct conflict of interest. My company is the civil engineering for it, and I'll be stepping down at this point in time. And in case there's anything that the board is requesting for my jurisdiction, I probably will be referred to. So I appreciate it and thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mathers, I'm going to ask fill out a conflict of interest form between now and the next meeting. I could have Jordan, the clerk for this meeting, email that form to you. It's an online form you can fill out.
Yeah, they already put it here when I sit down, so
Great.
no
Perfect.
problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
We have, excuse me, ordinance number 2445-2020. It is a quasi judicial hearing. Do any board members have any ex parte communication to disclose? No, Mr. Mathers? Seeing none. All those giving testimony, please stand, raise your right hand and be sworn in.
If anyone online is going to be giving testimony during this hearing, please raise your hand. Stand by, I have one.
Let the record reflect I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
Stand by, Mr. Fitzwater. I'll be
6.
turning on your
And
camera.
one online.
One online?
And we don't count the attorney guy, right?
Right. So I've got 5 in the room and 1 online.
6.
So 6 total, but I don't see the one online. There he is. Doug, can you raise your hand? There you go. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Doug?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let the record reflect that everybody testified affirmatively. If you could please state your name when you testify for the record.
Great. Okay, we'll get started with the staff report, please.
Yes, good evening, Tom Reed, Senior Planner, for the record. This will be a PowerPoint presentation by staff, followed up by another presentation by the applicant. So they are requesting a major amendment to the existing CPUD to approve a master site plan and 3 warehouse buildings. The site's located on the south side of Marketplace, across from the Walmart. The development to the east, Marketplace Center, is just finishing construction with similar warehouse types. The difference is that this site had an existing pond, which was permitted by South Florida to help with the drainage problems that we have been experiencing down in the Dubner properties. That work has been completed on that pond, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. So the existing land use is commercial. We're staying the same. We're amending the existing CPUD. And the site plan will consist of 3 new warehouse buildings. As I mentioned, the lake in the back has been reconfigured, actually made smaller and more deeper, and drains the immediate areas much better than it did before. So the open space that the applicant is originally providing was 26.4% of the site. Since this agenda package has been given to you, the applicant has added 10,000 square feet of pavers. The pavers get a 50% credit, and so it's bumping up the open space to 29.3%. I had originally in the staff report reported that a waiver would be necessary for more than 65% impervious surface. And this paver, the including of these pavers, was an effort to get closer to that 65% maximum. And that's the where the pavers will be located in the parking. Okay, so the landscape plan it meets the minimum requirements. Basically, it includes buffers, 22-foot buffer to the west. I'm sorry, east is the larger of the two buffers. It wraps around, and then there's a 10-foot buffer with landscaping on the east side. Also, the elevations have changed since the agenda package has been put together. The front elevations of the two buildings now include stucco on the entire building. All the way around, all four sides are now stucco. And it was a metal clad building, and it's changed to CMU for these front two buildings. I believe the owner who's going to own and occupy the building in the back wants to keep that as a metal skin building, but it will still have a stucco treatment along the bottom of the building. There's also one condition that has changed since your agenda package, and the owner is requesting that plat approval be obtained before we issue a certificate of occupancy, where previous to that, we wanted it before any permitting occurred. That staff recommends the approval of the ordinance 2445-2020 to the City Commission and turn it over to the applicant for his presentation.
Thank you. Applicant?
Good evening. My name is John Ahern, architect on the project for the buildings. And we have a few slides, presentations. They have been updated slightly to reflect the stucco finishes now. And that's a different project.
PDF, so it doesn't slide.
All right, from the northwest aerial, the three buildings, the reservoir, and the landscaping. See, this was prior to the stucco change on the buildings. They'll show up. This is the southwest view overhead. Coming down, still.
Sir, can you put the microphone right in front of you?
Either hold it in your hand or hold the other one.
Because they can't hear you online.
Okay. You hold the one on the podium like a singer microphone. The other podium, the one on the pole. You take it out of that. Hold it like you're. There you go.
Okay. Is that better? Okay. Sorry.
I don't know. Can they hear you? Can you hear them online?
I can hear them.
Okay. They said they can hear you.
A view along Marketplace Avenue, just south of the Walmart. Another view along the same street. All these are in stucco now. A view in between, the bike rack will be in between, as well as seating are benches for the people. From the rear of the reservoir and the back building, where the owner will maintain that. And that's it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you. Okay, any board members have any questions? Start with Lee.
Okay. So you're filling part of the north side of the lake? Is that what's happening? Or are you dredging it out more? And then what's happening there? Because the lake is bigger now than what you're planning on the lake being. So is the lake going to be smaller and deeper? Or is the lake going to just be smaller? Or is it going to be, what's it going to be?
For the record, my name is Bill Mathers.
You have to speak right into the mic or people will complain.
For the record, my name is Bill Mathers. The lake was originally developed under the Stewart Business Park about 30-some years ago. The current condition is that the owner now purchasing it had to do modifications according to the Stewart Business Park Association's requirements. One of the major things is there was a almost like a peninsula running between the canal and the lake. That's been removed. The materials that were underneath that area were there were hard pans, but kind of a mucky materials. That's all been removed. That area is deeper. The area is at or a little bit more than what we call the water control level. I mean, it's not raining, but there's more storage when you start to rise. And the other reason is that around that lake is he's also removed some of the impervious materials that were on the sides. So we've been able to increase the benefit to the park. And as a result, the association, even though the owner owns it, the association's taking back control. Okay, so the association will maintain and control it. The owner, he's left with what he's got. And so what he's doing for the rest of it is there's a lot of exfiltration trenches that are beneath the pavement, patio area for the pavers. So there's a lot that will absorb the water before it ever hits the lake. The amount of water that he can discharge is controlled by a permit from South Florida Water Management permit that was issued a number of years ago that prorated all the water. And I can't exactly remember, it's less than a CFS. So it's a minor amount compared to all his, pavement and building. But that's all because it's going into the soil, not being able to reach the pond. So, any more questions?
So you are filling part of the northern part and cleaning that barrier up, right?
All the area north will be filled for the buildings, yes.
Right, okay, thanks. That's my only lake question.
Thank you.
I'm concerned that just to the west of Building 3, you have a grassed area there. Will there be parking allowed on the grassed area, or does everybody understand that's a grassed area and there won't be any parking on there? The green part.
The green part is really a retention area from the shopping center.
No, not the green part. The piece just to the right of the green part that looks gray.
The
That gray, yeah.
Yeah, that's a grassed area. It's not landscaped. If the owner does want to park something temporarily, I'm not sure. I don't think he has much intention of it since it's supposed to remain as a grass
So
area.
what's the rule for that? Just so we're all on the same page. And the reason I bring it up is because one of the permitted uses is repair facility. So I don't know whether repair facility means that if you bring something there to be repaired and they don't repair it, whether it gets parked outside, et cetera, and whether something happens with that. So is there a rule about parking on grass in the city? I believe there is.
It's not designated. they will also have condominium documents that could further enforce.
Right, I just
these
wanted
rules,
everybody to
yes.
be really clear that there
Yeah.
wasn't going to be any parking on the grassed area, and that we do have code about leaving, if it's a repair facility, not that this would happen, but if it's a repair facility, there is code about leaving vehicles outside, et cetera, like we had with Greco at one point, right? Okay. You had, in one place in the documents, you talk about 6-foot interior sidewalks. And I noticed on your plans between building 2 and 3 and along the north side of building 3, those all say 5 feet. So since we're saying it's 6 feet, I think the plans ought to say that they're 6 feet also.
Can I just
Yeah, you can.
maybe, so it looks like that whole area between building 1, 2, and 3 is all paved. So is the intent for that sidewalk area just to be striping? So is there a real reason for it? Is that the city telling you you need to do that, or?
No, I put the safety striping in there because that is a walk between the buildings. So
Okay,
that would-
okay, so you know it's all gonna be paved.
That's fine, but I'm just saying that.
You want the striping to be 6 feet instead of 5?
Yeah, well, and I think it just needs to say that because in the presentation, it refers to interior connectivity or something and sidewalks on the interior of the parcel all being 6 feet. Talks about the 8 feet outside the property along the north end, along that road, whatever Marketplace. And then it talks about 6 feet all inside. And some of it's 6 feet, but you've got 2 places where it's 5 feet. And I just think it ought to, if we're going to say it's 6 feet, it should all say 6 feet. So that's my point on that. Is there a reason that it has 2 entrances and it doesn't have one that's lining up right opposite the Walmart entrance? Is there a reason for that? Like if I'm going to come out and go left, I'm coming out of there. I'm coming out of building 3. I visited the guy back there and I'm coming out of building 3 and I want to go left to get to US 1. What am I going to do? I'm not coming out on the eastern side because that would put me into, right? I'm going to come out on the western side and then I'm going to have to cross where the cars are waiting to go into Walmart? Or how am I going to make a left turn?
Yeah, what's out front is that when Walmart was built, there was these 2 areas that already had previous entrances, where you see the entrance now. The turn lane for along Market Street, you can turn left into Walmart, but they continue that left turn into a right turn.
Yeah.
So that's all a combined left turn, right turn. I don't know why they did it.
Yeah, so when I go to Walmart, which is quite frequently because I like Walmart, and I come from US 1 and I get in that turn lane, and if there's too much traffic coming towards me, I stay in that middle, I think they call it a suicide lane. I stay in the suicide lane and I keep going down and then I make a left turn into the second Walmart entrance. But I kind of feel like when people come out now, I don't know how they're going to get out of your space to go left. So are they planning on, is it like no left turn from the western one? You can only make a left turn from the eastern one? Or what is it? Ryan, can you figure that out for me? How do I make a left and go back to US 1?
I don't know if you're gonna have the traffic that you
There's a
would.
lot of traffic at Walmart. I go there all the time.
Yeah. Does a traffic study analyze that or discuss that at all?
I believe that we did have the traffic study, and I don't right now remember what the traffic study, said. We're looking more at the physical, being able to accomplish it.
Right.
Yeah, what's going to happen if Walmart's totally busy, the whole street gets kind of lined up, the businesses along this corridor, there's only going to be a retail in the one building. Which
Right.
will probably be stores or retail. The other 2 facilities are being used by the owners.
I just didn't understand why it wasn't just right opposite the Walmart one, why we have 2.
There is an
bracketing.
explanation in the traffic report if you want
And
to
what
read
was it? Yeah.
So driveways, the site currently has 2 driveways onto Marketplace, one on either side of Walmart driveway. The westernmost driveway is located on the Walmart left turn lane within the Walmart left turn lane. Therefore, it will be limited to right in, right out only. The two-way left turn lane currently serves the eastern driveway. The easternmost driveway will be the full access.
So there'll be a no left turn sign on the western driveway, right?
That's what it looks like.
And so if I'm going to Walmart and there's too much traffic coming and I go straight, I'm only gonna have to worry about the people who came out of the retail store trying to go left. That's fine. I'm okay with that. That's all right. So I marked your lighting. It doesn't appear to be any lighting between building 1 and building 2. And actually, there doesn't appear to be any, there's lighting kind of like behind the dumpster. There's 2 lights between the lake and building 3. There's 4 lights up along Marketplace. And then I saw 1 more light right behind the dumpster. So are we concerned about the light between
the 2
those?
buildings. The wall packs, sconces between the 2 buildings.
Yeah.
So that's fully lit. All right, the other are lamp posts for the parking, and there are lights at each of the canopies.
On the canopies that are
Both, all 3 canopies that front the building.
on the front of the building. Between building 1 and 2 though, is there lights?
Yes, on the wall pack, sconces.
Okay, because I looked at the elevations and I didn't see them, but if
I
you tell me they're
apologize
there,
for
I
that.
believe you because you're a sworn person now.
Yes, I'm not swearing.
And thank you for the pavers and thank you for backing up building 2 and building 3 so that the people who are looking across the lake, the few people that are looking that direction, see a nice piece of it. Not that the rest of it isn't nice, but see a nice frontage on the other side of the lake. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Mike? Nothing? Larry?
Nope, I'm good.
Good. Campbell?
No, I have no comments.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Sure.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, and now I need to ask if there's any member of the public that would like to speak. Or anybody remote?
There's nobody.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the vote.
Board Member Massing,
Yes.
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
Chair Strong.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments before we adjourn? All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
Move. Adjourn.
Motion, I heard Campbell. Did you second it, Campbell?
Sure.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I was good.